Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Welcome to the Jazz Shepherd channel. My name is Dan. Today we're talking jazz of all things. We have a little town festival getting underway here in Elgin, Minnesota. It's called Cheese Days. So they're hammering and drilling. There's going to be lots of activity outside. A lot of country music going to be played later. But we're going to do what best we can right now to put some jazz out there in the atmosphere. Today, welcome to episode 2 of Jazz Notes. And it's just simply a little notebook where we discuss a few various things. Nothing too heavy, nothing too deep. And well, I'll probably do one once in a while. Just jazz notes, jazz notebook. Allows me to cover multiple issues in a single episode in a small, lighthearted manner, nothing too in-depth. Which is important to do sometimes, especially with the summer heat. We've had a lot of 90-degree days already. It's middle of June and I'm already ready for summer to be wrapping up. We got 2 full months of summer to go at least. But I thank goodness for the pool in the backyard. Hopefully we can get central air in this building at some point. There's some movement now on the coffee shop, the Jazz Shepherd coffee shop. This is meant to be a lounge here. And we're kind of making some steps towards that. Maybe in a few months that coffee shop will actually exist. People can come in, have a latte, listen to some Miles Davis, or they get their coffee to go if they ain't into Miles Davis. But I think I've learned enough over the years DJing to know what I can play and what I can't play. I can't get away with playing some Coltrane Ohm or some Ornette Coleman. But there's a ton of fun, great jazz, especially piano jazz, that I'm hoping to enthrall people with. Just entice them into this urban chic, even in small town America. And there's a trend happening now where a lot of the demographic that was inner city is being moved out of the city for financial displacement, reclaiming neighborhoods, gentrification. And so a lot of the democratic kind of multicultural, liberal people, I think, are moving to small town America. I think there's going to be a shift in the small towns as the centers of cities become redeveloped for the rich, the nouveau riche. The outlying small towns are going to be what's affordable for that demographic. And so I think there'll be a pretty big shift in America in the next 50 years. Time will tell. First thing I want to talk about is Specs Powell. Fantastic drummer. You'll see him on a lot of session work, more associated with the Swing Era Cats, but he shows up in a lot of places. Fantastic musician. Doesn't have a lot of stuff as a leader, but this fantastic roulette session. Roulette's a fun little label I don't talk about very often. They were run by gangsters, and I'm not just saying that they were crooks and they were mean to their musicians. This was actually run by gangsters, mafia, and from Armstrong to Ellington to Basie, they had a lot of strong arm tactics from what I understand. I don't know how they treated their musicians. Honestly, I haven't delved that deep into it. My biggest connection with Roulette was they eventually bought Roost and reissued some of the Roost stuff and kept some of the Roost stuff in print. But this record's outstanding, and the musicians on here will tell you a lot. You got Jimmy Cleveland on trombone, one of the greatest trombone players ever. You got Nat Pierce on the piano, who was a great arranger, composer, worked with Basie and many others. The great Hank Jones plays piano on some of this. Ray Copeland's on the trumpet. Aaron Sachs is on the tenor and the clarinet. Sahib Shihab plays on this, alto and baritone. If you want to know what the blues and swinging blues sounds like, this is where you go. It's these cats from this generation, these old black guys, that can tell you how the blues swings, how jazz sounds, what swinging sounds like. And this will always be greeted to the ears because it's got a sweet, melodic sensibility with a nice pulsing groove that's always going to be gratifying to someone's ears. And the essence of jazz was always that. Sensual gratification, enticing, alluring, drawing people into the Negro experience. It was so tempting and so alluring. And the sensuality of it was so dramatic and made you want to go in to the chamber and know what was happening inside the temple. And there's an interesting thing that happens in jazz. As the proliferation of white jazz happens in the 50s, and it's really shocking sometimes. And when you go to Discogs or even eBay and you look at a seller, you can often tell where they're from, what part of the country they're from, simply by the jazz records they're selling. If you're from the New York area, you're going to have some cool titles, some black titles. You're going to have some Savoys and some Bethlehems and some Prestige and just titles by black artists on small labels that were more available in those areas. If you came from Tennessee or Ohio or Indiana or Wisconsin, those stores online are often filled with endless array of white watered down jazz. The big label stuff on Decca and Columbia and Capitol and RCA, some of it's good, some of it's absolute schlock that you can't give away. And there's so much of it, and it's kind of what pushes that saccharine, sweetened, easy, digestible jazz for white people. It's what made guys like Parker and Gillespie and Miles and Coltrane, those guys wanted to do something that was a little bit blacker, a little bit more outside of what you guys have turned our music into. And that same thing's happened in hip-hop numerous times, where there's always a re-blackification of it to try to make white folks a little uncomfortable making it their own. The N-word was used a lot in the 90s. I talked about this with a friend of mine the other day. And partly why the N-word was used a lot is because white folks ain't supposed to say it. Ain't supposed to be calling each other that. It's not a word white folks are supposed to feel comfortable saying to a black man or to another white person. And so the blacks started using it extensively, and so the white folks just sang along anyway. And you'll see that every generation there's a new sense of, this is our music, quit exploiting it, and we'll try to put something on it that makes it a little difficult for you to make it your own. Even some of those Jimmy Smith back in the Chicken Shack, those kind of soul food references that were in some of those Cornbread, it was meant to be black. It was meant to say, hey, this is our music. And that pastiche white, milky jazz that's so out there and everywhere and omnipresent, that's not really our music. You're misrepresenting it. We want you to know what, A, we don't really think that stuff's very cool, and B, this is how we do. And so some of the change, innovation in jazz is always about separating yourself from the milky mainstream that's exploiting what we've created. And it ends up pushing jazz beyond the parameters into the avant-garde, into the dissonance, and away from dancing, which more than anything else is what kills the music. When the black community needs to dance, it's an expression of joy, a celebration of life in spite of sorrow. And when we can't dance, you're taking away a lot of our purpose and meaning. And so that was a very important essence of jazz. And when that danceability left, the black audience left. And they stopped listening to both black and white artists at that point. And jazz became very much the domain of the college professors and the educated elite, kind of liberal inner city bourgeoisie. It's definitely an urban kind of white kid, Ivy League kind of thing. That record swings hard. Specs Powell, a name you should remember. Another record I want to show you real quick is a record I searched for a long time. And Roost has 23 or 24 10 inches from 53, 54, 55. I have all but 3 of them. And this was one of the ones I didn't have for a long time. Fantastic burnt gold black cover. It kind of predates all that Reed Miles graphic look, the geometry of it, the coloring, blocking of it. It's very prescient. It really sets the table for what's to come in jazz graphic design. The purplish and the red, it's just really eye-catching and very modern still. And it's got the great gold black drawing underneath. There's 2 Bud Powell 10 inches. They coupled them together on a Roost 12-inch LP. So I've had the music for a long time. So I didn't want to pay an exorbitant price for the 10-inch. And this one became available on Discogs a week and a half ago. And one of the tracks has a little noise distortion. And the guy sold it for $10. And so I got this in the mail yesterday. And like I said, only the one song has a little bit of a distortion. The rest of it plays pretty darn well. cover's actually in pretty decent shape, which leaves me only, I think, 2, maybe 3 Roost 10 inches I need to find. And I have pretty much all the Roost 12 inches. Roost is a great label, which I mentioned Roulette ends up buying. But man, Roost does some great stuff. Both black and white artists. The Sonny Stitt and Johnny Smith records alone at Roost are worth all your time diving into. Another record I got recently was this Betty Carter record on the progressive label Peacock. It's a small label out of Texas, believe it or not. There's a famous Sonny Chris record, Crossroads I think it's called, on this label with the signposts on it. And there's not a lot of other jazz on that label. This is one of the exceptions, the great Betty Carter. And she's a true jazz singer in the sense of Ella Fitzgerald, where she can bend melody and bring dissonance to the floor, and she'll scat and bebop and do all kinds of things. And it's actually called Out There, and it's not a misnomer. This record is incredibly dissonant, and a lot of it's brought to you by her voice. She's tackling these songs with a lot of edge and a lot of interesting approach and new rhythmic tact. She's not trying to just reiterate the song as it was done. She's really making them new and out there. And this is arranged by Gigi Grice, who's one of the great arrangers of this era. And even the lineup on this is astoundingly solid. Again, progressive jazz out of Texas. And I had to get this actually, I think from Croatia, if I remember. Might have been, I think it's Croatia I got this from. But Melba Liston's on this, Specs Wright is on this, Kenny Dorham, Sam Jones, Wynton Kelly, Sahib Shihab, Tommy Grice, Jimmy Powell, Benny Golson, Peck Morrison, from a couple different sessions, Jerome Richardson. It's pretty impressive, the lineup. Gigi Grice, of course. Just top of the mark musicians took this opportunity to play with Betty here and make a record that's by no means easy listening vocal. If you want to hear a vocal record that's going to challenge your parameters somewhat and give you something to think about, this record will do that. It's called Out There for a reason, and it's one of the more out vocal records that I've come across, to be honest. Now, the main thing of Notebook today is we're going to talk about Mal Waldron. And this was suggested to me by one of my supporters, followers, and I agree, I don't talk about Mal Waldron very much. Partly he's off in the W's, which I've actually resorted my records by label now. I'm still in that process. But you just don't think of Mal Waldron the same as you do Wynton Kelly and Bill Evans and a lot of the great piano players, Red Garland. And he's a fantastic player. Another New York product who plays in a very unique style. He has some of the flourishing of Bud Powell, some of the rhythmic pulsing and blocking of Horace Silver. He had a lot of interesting approaches and kind of a dark dissonance to his arrangements at times. He eventually had a really bad drug problem, and he has a breakdown where he doesn't know how to play anymore. Like that serious of a overdose slash mental breakdown, and he had to reteach himself how to play. And I think it was Charlie Mingus actually that said, let's diminish what you do when you bring back, and let's keep you in a more minimal sense, just edges and dissonance. And Mal's a very interesting cat, and he's on a lot of albums. His work as a leader is, there's not a lot of it in the 50s and 60s, but what there is great and really hard to find. However, he makes records as a leader for decades. So he has a big discography, and his side work is immense as well. He was kind of the house prestige piano player for a while, so he shows up in a lot of Jackie McLean's and Gene Ammons. Just a lot of prestige sessions he shows up on, and is a pretty dominant force. We're going to run through his leadership records here from the late 50s, early 60s. Most of it's going to be on prestige and new jazz, with a few exceptions. Now, this is Mal 1, with Mal Waldron, Gigi Grice, Idris Suleiman, and who's the drummer? Arthur Edgehill and Julian Ewell on the bass and the drums. Tough record to find. Even OJC copies of this go for pretty good money nowadays, $40, $50. So that's Mal 1. I was a big fan of Idris Suleiman in this period, by the way. Fantastic, clear tone. This is the Mal 2. The first one was late 7000s, 7090. The number 2 was early 7100s, 7111. And this has Jackie McLean, John Coltrane, Idris Suleiman, Sahib Shihab, and Bill Hardman. So that's really a great ensemble there. When you have Coltrane, McLean, Sahib, that means you have tenor, alto, bass, plus the 2 trumpets of Idris Suleiman and Bill Hardman. So it's a really outstanding group. They're not all on every track, but Thigpen is on drums on some of this, Art Taylor's on drums on some of this, and Julian Ewell is on the bass on all of it, it looks like. Another great session, tough to come by. I think that's a Japanese pressing. This is New Jazz 8201, and that's the second New Jazz release. I think it was recorded in 57 or 8. I don't think it actually comes out to 58 or 59. But again, outstanding stuff. I had to get this from Japan, even though I do believe it is an American pressing. Sorry about the jackhammer, if you guys can hear that. No, it's a Japanese pressing. So I can't even tell you the band on this one. Great stuff. I love that record. Listen to it a lot. I've looked up the band before, and it's probably similar to these other lineups. Julian Ewell's probably the bass player. I bet you Idris is probably on it. Jackie's probably on it, because he does a lot with Jackie. Mal 4, I love that cover. It's kind of Prestige doing the Reed Miles thing from Blue Note. And this has Mal Waldron with Addison Farmer on the bass and Kenny Dennis on the drums, so just a trio. It's a nice melancholy record with some dark colors and purples and lavenders. Number 5 is a record called Impressions. It's really a tough cover to make out. It's him kind of in, I don't know, a burnt out building or something. And again, it's a trio setting here with Al Heath, Addison Farmer, and Mal Waldron. Another great Prestige title. And like I said, I think I had to get most of these from Japan. That's how hard his records are to come by. And that goes for a lot of New Jazz titles. New Jazz titles are just some of the tougher records to find in the jazz canon. Also on New Jazz 8269, from the later graphic look that they do here in about 60-61. This is Eric Dolphy and Booker Irvin. So pretty serious horn players on this. Ron Carter, Joe Benjamin. Carter plays cello on this. And Charlie Percy, who I love, is a great drummer. Let's see, that brother can really play. Another fantastic Mal Waldron session. Again, tough to come by. This one I think is only on the Status label, although it did get a New Jazz number, which most Status titles did. It's 8316, which is right at the very end of the New Jazz sequence. Again, a great band here with Paul Kinnichet, Frank West, Jackie McLean, and John Coltrane. So pretty serious lineage. And if I had to reckon, this is probably recorded earlier than its release date, because it comes out in 65, but this stuff had to be recorded back when Coltrane was at Prestige, probably 57 or 58. It's a cool title, cool cover. It's not really a standard Prestige art. It's different, you know, but again, it's a much later release that probably played a role in that. Now he does do this record here for Bethlehem, but it comes out 60-45, which almost certainly makes this actually King recordings. And when King bought Bethlehem, they reissued a lot of their earlier jazz recordings on Bethlehem in the late 6000 series. That being said, it's a great session. I think it's just him by himself on most of it. The trio's on a couple tracks, and he's playing Billie Holiday tracks, and it's a beautiful record. This record here is from 1966, I think, maybe 65. It's this one lone release on Impulse. Sweet Love, Bitter. It's a film soundtrack. It's actually a great record. Some interesting musicians are on this. I've never seen the film. It's kind of a tougher record to come by for Impulse. Dave Burns is on the trumpet, who I'm a big Dave Burns fan. Fantastic Chicago trumpet player. Alfred Dreer's on the drums. George Coleman's on the alto sax. This is probably after he played with Miles Coleman. Charles Davis on the tenor, George DeVivier on the bass, and Richard Davis plays bass on a couple tracks as well. So it looks like if Dick Gregory, Don Murray, Diane Parisi is on in the film. Again, I've never seen the film, and I'd like to maybe see it someday. I just don't have the time to watch a ton of films, and when I do watch TV and film, I'm often doing it with my wife, which impairs to some degree what I can watch. Now, this isn't really a Mal Waldron record, but they kind of share equal billing here, all four of them. Herbie Mann, Charlie Rouse, Kenny Burrell, and Mal Waldron. That's just a great record on New Jazz again, 8211, probably 59, 58 in there. A cool cover. It's got that classic prestige look at this point. A record I actually have not listened to in a while. Nice old New Jazz label, 8211. So it's number 11 in the New Jazz sequence. It's got the little merry-go-round horsey on it. And the last title I want to show you by Mal is an example of some of his side work. This is Teddy Charles with Idris Suleiman, John Jenkins, and Mal Waldron. This is Cool and another one of those New Jazz titles that's impossible to find original copies of. Great album cover. I'm guessing that's at Jones Beach or Coney Island and Long Island, probably. Yeah, it's got to be a beach. I don't think that's a pool. Fantastic cover. Fantastic Teddy Charles with that West Coast cool with some fantastic musicians helping him bring it to life. A great record. Again, a Japanese pressing, because, again, that's how you got to find a lot of New Jazz titles. And the last thing I want to show you here in this little episode is this Music Minus One, Volume 1, which has Mal Waldron on some of this. Nat Pierce is also Barry Galbraith, Milt Hinton, and O.C. Johnson. And this Music Minus One label, big thick spines on them, they have probably a dozen titles at least. And what they are is professional jazz musicians playing tracks people know, but leaving space for you to play along. So if you're a saxophone player, if you're a piano player, if you're a drummer, if you're a bass player, if you're a horn player, there's various different records that will have various instruments not part of it, and they'll leave spaces. Jackhammer Jill over there, they'll leave spaces for you to fill in as a player and rehearse. Like I said, there's quite a few of them out there. This is the only one I've ever collected, but Mal Waldron ends up being on a lot of them for some reason. And I initially thought this was an Epic release for some reason when I bought it, but it just seems to be its own label. But the fact that it's so affiliated with a lot of these great musicians, I'm sure some of the label was behind it. So anyway, that wraps up today's episode of the Jazz Notebook on the Jazz Shepherd channel. Stay tuned. We got some fun stuff coming. We're going to dive deep into some other cool things coming up here very shortly. Appreciate you all for helping and supporting. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters. If you want to be a Patreon supporter, feel free to pledge for $5 a month. It's always definitely appreciated. And if not, you can go to my merchandise page, buy a t-shirt. That's always appreciated as well. No obligation, of course. Y'all be blessed. Y'all be safe. Hopefully this coffee shop will come to fruition and I can invite you all into my lounge. Talk to you soon. Peace.